It probably won't surprise you to know that football is America's number one sport. But did you know that football replaced baseball as America's pastime in 1967? And we know this because the Gallup poll has been asking Americans what their favorite sport is for decades. In 1962, they overwhelmingly said it was baseball, but by 1972, Americans overwhelmingly said it was football. So somewhere around 1967, football replaced baseball as America's pastime. And this is consistent with what I asked in polls of you, our audience. You said that America's most popular sport right now is football. But like you, I asked, what was the most popular sport in the 80s? And I too thought it was baseball. But it turns out football's dominance started a lot earlier. So let's talk about how football became America's number one sport. The number one reason you'll hear if you do any research is that baseball is boring. Now, I've seen some analysis that looked at how many total minutes of action there are in baseball games versus football games, and there may even be a slight edge to the amount of action in baseball games. So I don't really think it's that baseball is boring, but I think the physicality of football is what makes it that much more exciting to watch. And also, baseball can seem like a long slog of one-on-one matchups, whereas every play in the NFL is 11 men orchestrating together versus 11 other men on every single play. So I think inherently football is just more physical and exciting to watch. Reason number two is that early on the NFL figured out that it needed to be on national TV. And so when you think about baseball, it's generally viewed through the lens of your local market. And you originally in the 70s, 80s, 90s didn't get many out of market games. Whereas football early on had opportunities for everyone in the nation to see every team on like Monday Night Football, for example. And so football was able to create a much broader audience where the Cowboys allegedly became America's team and everybody got to see the dominance of Joe Montana. Reason number three is fantasy football and gambling. So football definitely benefited the most from fantasy games. Fantasy football is awesome. You only have to set your lineup once a week. Whereas baseball, there's 162 games. There's games every night. It's kind of annoying to keep track of everything. And then similarly for gambling, DraftKings has partnered obviously with the NFL, and then it's easier to sit down on a Sunday and play some bets versus every day of the week having the opportunity to gamble on baseball games. It just doesn't make it as fun or as special. Reason number four is that with a 17-game schedule, every game in the NFL matters. Every game is worth watching, and your entire season and whether you make the playoffs can turn on an upset on any given Sunday. Whereas Major League Baseball's 162-game season can tend to drag on. There's a lot of time where it doesn't feel like every game matters. It doesn't have the same importance when you're watching a certain series versus every weekend in the NFL. Reason number five is quarterback star power. In team sports, there's just no position more important than that of the quarterback. So quarterbacks are elevated to these global stars. And when you think about that's compared to baseball, starting pitchers only pitch once every 5 days. And even the best hitters in Major League Baseball, quote unquote, fail 70% of the time, as hitting 300 is actually viewed as an all-star. I think another major reason is that in the playoffs and obviously for the Super Bowl, the NFL embraced a winner-take-all approach early on. So every playoff game or Super Bowl you're watching, you're watching history. This is a picture of Joe Montana's pass, quote-unquote, the catch to Dwight Clark in the 1982 NFC title game, where Dallas beat the Cowboys 28-27. Baseball, basketball, and hockey all have 7-game series with long playoff processes, and it doesn't feel like every game is really that important. Also, you'd be forgiven if you thought that Bill Buckner lost the World Series to the Red Sox in 1986. But it turns out that was only Game 6, and the game was already tied in extra innings. The Red Sox still had Game 7 left, but even these amazing moments in baseball aren't necessarily series or season defining like they would be in football. Reason number 7 for the popularity of football is the popularity of college football. When you look at how important the college playoff series is, how every week in college football is a national event, and compare that to college baseball, which just does not get the ratings, the interest, the fan appeal, and the crowds of college football, you can understand how all of this excitement and momentum in football would translate to the NFL much more than baseball. Reason number 8 is the quote-unquote parity in football. The whole theme that on any given Sunday, any team can beat any other team really is true. It also keeps fans engaged much longer into the season because anyone can have a chance. Any team can have a great year and make the playoffs. So they're much more engaged longer throughout the season. And if you haven't seen it, this is the circle of parity where if you follow it around, every team in one season beats every other team based on who they beat. So for example, you can start here and see that the Bengals beat the Patriots and the Patriots beat the Broncos, and you follow it all around until the Dolphins, who the Patriots beat the Bengals, who beat the Patriots. And so you really can make an argument that any team on any day can beat any other team in the NFL. I think the 9th reason, and this is a wild card, is as popular as football is in the recent years, it really has unlocked a whole new audience with the popularity around Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. So just when you thought football couldn't get any more popular, these images are from articles of Vanity Fair and Vogue magazine, and football is now reaching a younger, more female demographic than they were before, as if it was even possible to elevate football to an even larger stage. And speaking of, the only way for football to actually grow in popularity might be to broaden beyond the United States into global markets. And that's why you see every year there are international games played in London, Mexico, Germany, as well as Brazil. And it may be that the only way for the NFL to grow even more popular than it is today is to grow internationally. And there's even talk about adding European teams to the league to broaden its appeal much more globally. So where does all this go? Well, recently, Major League Baseball has made improvements with the pitch clock and other ways to speed up the game, which I think is actually really helping the appeal of baseball and making it a much more palatable 3 hours-ish time frame. And then football, obviously the biggest risks to football are injuries, especially all these head injuries, and the audience or the fans turning away from such a violent sport. But in summary, I don't see football's dominance changing anytime soon, and they were very smart to build a product from the beginning, as well as a national appeal to become America's pastime.